Welcome to Ewtn's continuing live coverage of the Synod of Bishops on the Family. Welcome to this gorgeous October evening here in Rome. You can hear the bells chiming in St. Peter's behind us. It's a perfect day to talk about the Synod. This morning, the Synod participants met once again in the Circoli Minores. This is their sixth meeting in their small circles, and they began their discussions on part 2 of the Instrumentum Laboris, which is the Synod's working document. This deals with marriage as a sacrament, indissolubility, the family in the Church's documents, then even more about indissolubility, and the role of families, helping other broken families, and of course mercy and revealed truth. So they have a lot to talk about this week. At today's daily press briefing in the Holy See press office, Father Lombardi began by explaining what had happened in the morning session and on last Saturday, because what happens on Saturday evenings we are not made aware of course, until Monday at 1 o'clock in the press office. The central topic was marriage preparation and accompaniment, as well as catechesis for engaged couples. This is a theme that is certainly emerging from the Synod. They also spoke about communion for divorced and remarrieds, and that was brought up as well as the need to help families helping other families to make sure that marriages stay strong. 2 couples were present at the press conference today for the first time, one from India and one from Brazil. Ketty and Pedro de Rezende are from Brazil and are engaged in family pastoral work. They talked about what is needed to have a successful marriage. Let's listen.
Actually, dealing with married couples, I certainly think it's very interesting to have a good preparation for marriage, but even more important is an ongoing continuation preparation. I think it's not something that Pedro and I, for instance, have had preparation and continue to have preparation. It just enriches our lives, and we're always changing. We go through different phases in life as a couple, and it enriches our relationship as well as it puts us in contact with other couples. The preparation courses for parents is extremely important. How to raise your children. We find that parents are at a loss. They don't know what to do at the different stages, and each time we find greater challenges to be able to educate our children. So there are a variety of courses already available where we live that is oriented age-wise.
One thing that was brought up by the Synod Fathers last week was the need to make sure that homes are safe places for children and churches as well. Today in Rome, a meeting of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors took place, a commission that was set up specifically by Pope Francis in 2013 to ensure the safety of minors. To discuss this further, I would like to welcome onto the set Dr. Gabriel Deliaco, who is a member of this commission, to talk about the recent meeting which took place here in Rome this week. So thank you, Doctor, for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
The plenary session, which is a fancy word for saying kind of an annual meeting of everyone that's on this commission, just took place in Rome. What were kind of the general topics that were brought up?
Well, there were several general topics brought up during our meetings. One of them was the education of families, children, and communities. And so I think it's very timely that this was also taken up in the Synod as we were discussing this topic during our plenary meeting. Our meeting, which takes place twice a year actually, occurs over a period of 3 days. Now, in addition to the meeting, we had working group meetings of smaller groups coming together and talking about several topics, one of them being the education of families, children, and communities in the protection and safeguarding of minors and vulnerable persons.
How can we do that? Because I know the Church is doing all she can on her end to educate the clergy on how to do that, and they're working with their bishops. How can we, on the local level, help to ensure their safety?
That's a very good question. The best form of protection is prevention. And the best way to ensure prevention is education, by getting people to know and understand the information that they need to know and understand about things like what constitute healthy relationships, what constitute healthy forms of touch and appropriate forms of touch, and also what to do when a person, especially a child, feels something is inappropriate, so that the laity themselves can be empowered to work together with the clergy who serves us in order to prevent these things from happening.
You work quite closely, is that right, with bishops' conferences throughout the world. How has that experience been?
Yes, we do. In fact, we recently concluded or just had a workshop in the Philippines with the Filipino Bishops' Conference. They invited us earlier this year to come and give a workshop to them on the safeguarding of minors to help them know where they are right now in terms of the systems they have in place and also how to strengthen these. And the workshop went very well. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there are about 92 active bishops listed on the roster in the Philippines.
Wow.
86 of them are healthy enough to travel. So 86 were slated to come. 76 in the end ended up coming to the workshop because 10 had some emergency going on. But 76 out of 92 bishops, that's about 90%, almost the whole conference.
Wonderful.
And they came from all over the Philippines. Some had to travel 8 hours by boat at night and then another 4 hours by land just to catch a plane to get to Manila for the workshop.
How many days? How long did that go on?
The workshop went on for 3 full days, beginning with Holy Mass in the morning, and then after that at 6 a.m.
Okay.
And then lasted until 6 p.m. each night.
Explain to us your specialization, because several people are on this commission with different specialties. What is your role as a doctor in this?
The expertise I bring to the commission is both pastoral counseling and psychotherapy with persons who have been abused, either as children, adolescents, or adults, and with persons also who have been perpetrators of this sexual abuse.
In your work with adolescents, how do you work to recuperate that trust? Because maybe somebody watching has been through it or knows somebody that has been through it. How in the world do you even begin to rebuild that trust in people and in God, too?
Yes, that's a very good question. It's a very difficult situation as well, particularly for the person who's been abused. I think the very first part is to help the person establish a sense of trust in me or in the therapist, whoever that is.
Right.
And then we can build on from there. The church itself has no articulated theology about sexual abuse, especially committed by persons in authority. And so that's an area that needs to be developed, and it's one area that our commission is looking at. We have a working group on the spirituality and theology as well, headed by the clergy who are members of the commission.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah.
And the response, as you said, of the bishops has been just overwhelming. I think, with all that has happened, they're also trying to find a language and procedures to make sure that this doesn't happen. And Pope Francis, of course, leading the charge on this for this commission. What do you think? Has it been a positive experience working with the bishops' conferences all around the world? I mean, their reaction, not just in the Philippines, one you just mentioned, but worldwide. I mean, is it kind of
yes, generally,
surprising? I mean,
I come from the Philippines, which is a very Catholic country, so I'm not surprised by a positive response from bishops.
Right.
Let me put it that way. But
I thought maybe they might be uncomfortable,
Yeah.
but no.
Well,
okay.
the topic is uncomfortable for everyone, for
Right.
all societies, inside and outside the church. Now, that being said, I think the bishops' responses have been very positive. Our commission has representation from 5 continents. And what I can say is all of the bishops' conferences are interested. And for example, one of the things that Pope Francis asked them to do was to draft and submit guidelines that are updated and appropriate for their cultural context. And practically all, if not all by now, the conferences have responded. Yeah.
Part of your work deals with assessing candidates, does it not, to the priesthood and the religious life. What in their formation needs to be emphasized to maybe avoid these situations?
Yes, that's a very good question. We don't deal directly with, so we don't actually do the assessments as a commission. Our role is to advise the Holy Father about policies, procedures, initiatives, and programs that would optimally safeguard our children and vulnerable persons.
Yeah.
And so we operate pretty much like a think tank would for a president.
Yeah.
You know, presidents, leaders of government need think tanks for the ideas that they use, that they think are good, that they can then translate into programs that they then have their governments execute. So that's our role. And what we're looking into in terms of formation is what would best help prepare a person to become a priest and be healthy amid all the stress that they experience and face as a priest. our priests, in fairness to them, they take on 2, 3, 4, 5 full-time jobs.
Wow.
Yeah, imagine that. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
lot of stress right there.
Right.
And there's a lot of expectation on them.
Sure.
And one thing that has been found, which is in research done in the US, the only research of its kind in the history of social science research, is in the John Jay study. What they found was that human formation programs in particular help to prevent the occurrence of abuse later on. They really help people mature and develop well.
So good formation.
Yes.
We were lucky to be present at the briefing today after your plenary, and I caught up with one of your colleagues there. You know him, Bill Kilgallen. He's the chairman of the National Catholic Safeguarding Commission, and I asked him how he felt about having a pope that was so hands-on in all of this. And let's listen to what he said, because I'm going to ask you the same question.
Okay.
Here's Bill Kilgallen.
We started the meeting this year by going to Mass with Pope Francis, and he then greeted us all individually and talked about what we're doing. And I found that very, very, very helpful. I mean, I'm hugely impressed by Pope Francis, I have to say, because I've spent most of my working life working with people on the margins of society, people who were excluded in all sorts of ways. And to have a pope who's got that commitment that he has to people on the margins of society and of the church, and sees the church as drawing people in and as being somewhere that should attract people from the margins, is hugely encouraging. And he's been very clear on this issue. He's set up a commission. He said, I want people who will tell me it's as it is. You know, this group that he's got together is a very interesting group of huge experience and expertise and very independent-minded individuals. It's, I have to say, it's a brilliant group to work with.
So just following up on what Bill said, how would you, what would you have to say about Pope Francis' involvement with this? A pope who's so hands-on and wants to get this done worldwide.
Well, I think it is absolutely the best thing that anyone could do who has the kind of influence that he does. Influence of in person's minds in terms of the ideas they have, and also influence on the hearts of people, where the motivation really comes from, to effect change with such a subject as child sexual abuse, which is so difficult for people to deal with. Even family members, for example, who care very much for their children, find it very, very difficult to deal with. And to have him identify this as a priority in his papacy, to create a commission. I don't know of any other world leader that has created a commission to look at the topic and to advise him basically, and advise the local churches on the actual policies that they initiate and implement to be able to address this problem head on.
Doctor, thank you so much for being on the show. We're going to continue to follow the work of that commission and bring the results of that to our viewers. Thank you for being on the show.
Yes, yeah, you're welcome.
When we come back, we speak to Father Robert Dodaro, the editor of last year's famous 5 Cardinals book, a book written to dismantle, as it were, Cardinal Casper's proposal for communion for divorced and remarried, so stay tuned. Welcome back to EWTN's live daily coverage of the Synod on the Family. I'd like to welcome Augustinian Father Robert Dodaro, president of the Institutum Patristicum Augustinianum here in Rome. It's very wordy, but it means it's a patristics institute here in the Eternal City, and he's a professor of theology there as well. Father, welcome to the program.
Thank you. I've enjoyed watching this program
Oh,
by
you
the way,
have?
over the past week.
Oh,
yes.
good, yes.
Yes,
Everybody,
you're all doing You're all doing a great job.
Continue to tell everyone to watch and tweet, and we've loved all the audience response as well.
Good,
so
good.
glad we have a fan in you.
You do.
I wanted to get right into some questions about the Synod. This week, they're really getting into the heart of marriage. They're talking about indissolubility. This leads to a natural discussion on if a marriage is indissoluble, what about those who are divorced and remarried? And this is what was kind of known last year as kind of the Casper proposal, kind of proposing a penitential path for them to come back to the sacraments. What are the holes in that argument, in your opinion?
The problem is that of course, they remain married to their first spouse.
Yeah.
That marriage takes place in Christ, and so that bond cannot be broken by anyone, not by the Pope, not by the Church. So that's the problem with a second marriage. The problem is that they're still really married to the first spouse. Now, what Cardinal Casper proposed is that the Catholic Church study what the Orthodox churches do in that situation, and that we copy that, or we try to adjust that to the Catholic Church.
They have a path, right? They have a path of return.
Yes, yes. It's not clear that it's uniform among all the Orthodox churches, but all of them have some sort of pathway that way, yes.
Okay, but what are the holes?
The problem with it for us is that we have a different understanding of marriage than the Orthodox. I don't think a lot of people know this. But for us, really, marriage takes place in Christ. And as I said, that bond cannot be broken. The Orthodox don't recognize that.
Okay.
They allow for divorce in certain circumstances, and therefore second and even third marriages.
Okay.
But we can't adapt their system because we can't adapt their theology to ours.
I mean, couples, of course, in the Catholic faith can get an annulment.
Yes.
Of course, that means the marriage never took place.
That's right.
But the church has to look at those circumstances and say yes, and then they can get remarried. But the problem is, for people at home that may not realize, if you get divorced without an annulment and you're a Catholic and you get remarried, that's an adulterous situation. So the Pope and I think the Synod Fathers are looking at, with so many souls in this situation, what do we do? Because we want to get them somehow back to the sacraments. So I think that's at the heart of maybe what's going on in the Synod.
That's right.
Because they're souls, you know.
That's absolutely right. And I don't think anyone on the side of those who oppose Cardinal Casper, I don't think anyone is lacking in compassion for these Catholics. The question is, how can we help them gradually to make progress toward a lifestyle that is compatible with their first marriage, their real marriage. And that requires that we accompany people, yes. And various cardinals and bishops have put forward suggestions as to how we might do that. But these are already really found in Pope St. John Paul II's document Familiaris Consortia.
Which came out of the last Synod on the family.
That's right, the 1980 Synod, yes. And what he said is that, first of all, pastors of souls, so bishops in their dioceses and pastors in their parishes, should be really close to those individuals. I think what Pope Francis is absolutely right about is that we cannot make them feel that they're not a part of the church.
Right.
And regardless of the fact that our language really insists that they are part of the church, we're somehow not communicating that as clearly as we need to. Okay. And I think Pope Francis is right about this.
Right.
So this is the job of the parish priests and the bishops, to try to convince people, no, you are part of the church.
Yes.
Come to Mass, come to meetings, pray with us.
Right.
Take Eucharistic adoration, take part in the life of the church, the spiritual, have a spiritual direction, even. But confession is difficult because if they're not willing to renounce sexual relations with their second partner, then they're not open to conversion on that point, and that creates a problem for absolution.
And I think all the talking about the discussions are happening. So many people had the impression, there might be a change in practice here.
Yes.
And so no, I think we've put that to rest, and I think the Holy Father's put that to rest, and this Synod so far has put that to rest. No, we're looking at how that you just said. Your family, come back home, and then maybe they can find a way back to the sacraments.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Yes. Over a period of time, they may be able to do that.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask you, there was so much thunder last year around this Synod, so much thunder. And I saw, let's say Cardinal Casper everywhere, a lot more cardinals speaking in the press. The silence this year is almost deafening. Where is Cardinal Casper? Where are the other ones? Why are they being so quiet?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I imagine they think, as I think, that all the arguments pro and contra concerning extending communion to divorced and civilly remarried Catholics, all those arguments have been made.
Okay.
They've been rehearsed over and over again. We all know them by heart.
And we don't want to hear it anymore.
And really, yeah, there's a certain fatigue that's
Yes,
setting in about
yes.
hearing this over and over again. That doesn't mean that that the struggle to get 2/3 of the bishops to approve the proposal is over.
Definitely.
I don't think we
Okay.
have put this to rest yet in terms of the decision of the bishops within the synod itself.
Okay.
It still has to be voted on,
Right,
and we'll have to
right.
see how that goes.
All right.
But
Yeah.
I don't see. Yeah, you're right. I don't see too much of a public debate.
I'm
going
glad.
on
I'm
right now.
glad,
No,
and
really,
and I
yeah.
think I don't know if something maybe even was said to them to say, listen, I think we're just confusing sheep. The sheep were just like, what? Oh, it seems like the bishops are infighting, and so I think
if
this
your
quiet is
viewers,
good.
and my friends, if people are confused about marriage in the Catholic Church, they should be.
Okay.
It's actually a very complicated theology, and our understanding of marriage is very complicated. And I have a lot of sympathy for parish priests and others, lay people, who have to prepare young Catholics for marriage.
Oh, boy, yeah.
To be able to cover in so short a period so much really complex theology.
When they probably haven't been catechized that well
That's
up to their
absolutely
marriage
right.
day,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
you what? Even Pope Francis said, "You think you can do this in 6 weeks?
Yeah.
Pre-Cana? No."
No.
And so it's a huge challenge for formation. But if we get them in the formative part, before they get to the altar, we have a lot less annulments and problems to deal with, I think, on the other side of the coin. I just wanted to ask you, as a synod expert as well, what do you find different about this synod? Do you see more universal discussion happening? There was a challenge that maybe this was a little too Eurocentric. What is your view of this synod so far, how it's going?
I'm not really inside of it. I'm watching much like you are from the outside. But what I believe is happening, first of all, is the strong presence of the African Church.
Love it.
This may be the first time since the 5th century that the African Church has made itself heard in the Universal Church in Rome. And African bishops and cardinals have been the strongest in speaking out in defense of Catholic theology of marriage. And
They're being heard.
They really are
Yeah.
being heard. They're forcing others to hear them.
Good.
They're speaking out strongly. The Polish bishops too. I'm really amazed at the strength and the unity of the Polish bishops. The Eastern European bishops have taken strong stands on this and have done a lot of work. Cardinal Erdo, a week ago today,
Right.
he made his opening address. And he was asked by an interviewer afterwards if the issue of communion for divorced and remarried Catholics would be reintroduced. And he said no. And the questioner said, but the Orthodox, what about the Orthodox bishops? And he said, what I think has happened in the last year is that a lot of bishops have read up on the Orthodox practice. They've actually been doing some reading. And that's another difference between then and now. I think in the last synod a year ago, bishops came to Rome, and you can't blame them. They're busy people. But I don't know that they were prepared for the issues that
so
hit
many,
them.
like you say, it's a complicated issue in so many different aspects. And as the issues are coming up, they didn't know exactly what would come up. And so they've had a whole year to prepare. We're glad they used that year wisely. You're a patristic expert. So before we let you go, I have a kind of a fun question to ask you.
Okay.
You mentioned the last time the African bishops might have been heard would have been in the 5th century.
Yes.
And you studied the church fathers, which of course go back to the very beginning of the church. What do you think the church fathers would make of this synod and the last one?
I'm glad you asked that question. I really am. Because I talked to my students about early church councils and synods. They were raucous events. They were riots.
I imagine so, yeah.
Absolutely. This is nothing.
This is nothing?
Really,
Are you serious?
Okay. No, it's a tea party compared with the councils in the first 7 centuries.
Okay.
St. Gregory Nazianzus once said, I have never been to a church council, where I thought more good was done than evil.
This is wonderful. Well, I mean,
this is one of
wonderful,
the fathers of the church.
Yeah, one of the fathers. So, I mean, just to put it in perspective, I mean, with all the media now, the whole world is able to know what's happening as it's happening. Of course, these synods took place very privately back in the day. I mean, even up to the 1950s, when Paul VI reinstated them. So I think it's good for the people. This is normal.
Absolutely
so many
normal.
people in a room, so many opinions, but as long as the struggle and the discussion, heated as it is looking for the truth, to go forward together in the truth.
Yeah, if we want synodal government in the church, this is what we're going to have.
Okay. Well, we look forward to see how it's going to turn out. Father Dodaro, thank you so much for being on the program tonight. That's our show for this evening. Remember, for all the latest information on the Synod, visit our special Synod page on EWTN.com and follow us on Twitter at EWTN. Send us your questions and comments and use the hashtag EWTN Synod. I'm Mary Shovlin. Good night from Rome.